Welcome to the Cancer Neuroscience Symposium Conversation Series. I'm Monty Montano, Executive Editor of Wiley's Advanced Portfolio. We're excited to partner with MD Anderson and host this series to hear from key speakers featured in the February 2026 Cancer Neuroscience Symposium. Thank you for tuning in as we explore ideas to advance cancer neuroscience together. Excellent. Well, delighted to meet you, Yi, and welcome to this conversation. We're super excited about this Cancer Neuroscience Symposium in February, and as part of the process of building up to that, just having conversations with many of the speakers, including yourself. So, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Monty.
I wanted to maybe begin with, I know that you spent time in Wyoming. Yellowstone Park, I guess, is there, and there's the Tetons, beautiful, beautiful place. And then moved on to San Francisco, and currently you're in New York.
Yes.
So maybe give us a little bit of a sense for, that sort of that timeline and what eventually led you to New York.
Yes. So I started my PhD in University of Wyoming, where I studied electrophysiology and neurobiology in Jeff Woodbury's lab, who developed a technique that we can record single fiber recordings from neonatal animals. And my project is really to understand how individual neurons that respond to thermal or mechanical stimulus during development. And then I moved to UC San Francisco for my postdoc fellow research, where I actually started to study cancer nerve interactions. Dr. Brian Schmidt, who was my postdoc mentor, who is also a surgeon and also a clinician scientist, that he told me about how oral cancer that is such a devastating disease that really cause suffering in patients, which got me really interested into cancer pain. And then he is also one of the earliest clinicians that really understood the engaging patients into research. So actually in his lab, I had opportunities to interact with patients and gained firsthand knowledge in terms of how the disease of the patient as well as the pain. So that's why I stayed in the field, since my postdoctoral fellowship, and now I launched my own individual independent research, also in cancer pain.
It's fascinating. When you think about pain, obviously it changes over the course of disease, right? I mean,
Yes.
I'm just wondering, so there probably are pain phenotypes or pain endophenotypes and pain patterns. And I'm just wondering about, especially in the case of oral cancer pain, does the type of pain and maybe the neurons that are being involved in that pain change from sort of very early in tumor progression to late stage? And what does that look like?
Yeah, so this is exactly that we are trying to capture. So, pain, cancer pain, especially oral cancer pain, is really devastating because it affects patients' eating, talking, and drinking. So we actually we did a very complicated pain phenotyping in patients. Initially, used UCSF oral cancer pain questionnaire that was developed by Dr. Schmidt, which really tried to capture how's the pain look like, whether regarding to its intensity, sharpness, and aching when the patients are not talking, eating, drinking, and when the patients are using their oral cavity for function. And later on, we found that it's more complicated than that. That not only the pain changes over time. So unfortunately, most of the patients, when they went to the clinic because of the pain, that they often has already too late in their disease. So most of the cases, early cancer pain early on doesn't trigger pain, but when the disease progresses, then the pain gets worse. And more complicated is that when we developed a new pain questionnaire to try to capture whether, in addition to pain at the site of tumor, whether the patients also develop a pain in other body locations. And we found that yes, indeed, that in addition to their pain at the tumor site, they have pain in all other orofacial locations, and that they can have, for example, numbness in one area, and then they have burning sensation in another area, and they have pins and needles in another location. So it's really complicated. And in a recent study that we conducted, we found that patients also develop food sensitivities. For example, there's a subset of patients that they have pain due to the food sourness, and also food that is spicy. And some patients, they actually have pain when the food texture is too hard or rough.
I mean, just thinking about what you were saying about, your excitement and interest in getting into patient engagement, and some of these studies you're mentioning about questionnaires make me think about, and then your background in mechanosensation, mechanostimulation, it makes me think about sort of this subjective versus objective measures of pain, and how you're nicely positioned to both get assessments of self-reported pain and also sort of the molecular and the physiologic conditions that may account for or explain that pain. And there's probably some concordance, but there's also probably some discordance, right? And I just wonder, as you move along the scale in subjective self-reported pain, are there correlated changes in sort of ECM or mechanostimulation or nociceptor signaling, or is this extraordinarily heterogeneous across different patient populations and people?
Yeah, it is heterogeneous. It really depends on the location of the tumor, the stage of the disease, and also the sex also matters, right? So in terms of the subjectivity of the questionnaire, we do recognize that. And then I know that some of my colleagues in the field, such as Dr. Schmidt and also my other collaborators, that they have been studied to using quantitative sensory testing to really capture pain phenotypes more objectively. So I think that we actually have a simultaneous study in collaboration with Dr. Bia in Loma Linda University, who has been doing quantitative sensory testing
in California, Loma Linda in California.
Yeah, yes, we actually do find that there's a good positive correlation in terms of a QST versus the oral pain questionnaire.
I wonder about this neurostimulation. Can it predict the onset of pain? You think about whether or not there are, either chemical or mechanical or inflammatory, or maybe even thermal changes in the oral cavity and reception of signaling in the oral cavity that can precede or maybe serve as sort of biomarkers for the onset of a tumor. I just wonder how you can use some of these. What happens first? Do you feel the pain because there's sort of a remodeling in response to the initiation of a tumor? Or does what happens first? And can you dissect that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And so one thing that for the pain people, we do know that, for example, the acute pain is actually good for you, right? It's actually an alarming system that really protect us from those dangerous signals, such as burning heat or extreme cold. So why cancer early on that, during the early development of cancer or pre-cancer stage that usually patients don't have pain. So that is a really perplexing question that we don't
That's
understand.
interesting. They don't have pain.
Yes, yes.
Hmm.
So somehow that cancer is cells are very smart in a way that it shut down the alarming system. So I think looking into the patient population who have early cancer or even pre-cancer might be very important into dissecting out the mechanisms in terms of pain development.
Can we sort of think a little bit more about the lack of pain early on? Um, as I'm sure you know, nociceptors are part of the receptor family that transduce the pain signal.
Mm-hmm.
I just wonder, do tumors, at least in your experience, or do cancer cells, do they modify or modulate nociceptor signaling early on in a way that's different later when pain is felt and experienced?
Yeah, so we have compared, for example, pre-cancer cells or even normal keratinocytes versus the cancer cells. We do know that the cancer cells they release more pro-nociceptive signals such
Hmm.
as pro-inflammatory cytokines or toxic lipids that might activate or sensitize the nociceptors.
Very, very, very interesting. Now, you sort of touched on something, the sort of the peripheral um, effects that are felt across the whole body, and you think about comorbid, in the context of cancer progression, you think about comorbid conditions, like diabetes and other chronic conditions. None of us is like just cancer. Usually it's
Yeah.
cancer in the context of multiple other morbidities, one, two, three, four, depending on, the variety of factors. Can you speak to how uh, the prevalence of these comorbid conditions might aggravate or make more complicated sort of an understanding of sort of the pain in the context of the cancer progression?
Yeah, so we do capture quality of life as well, in addition to pain questionnaires. So we have a bunch of questionnaires that we giving to patients. So we do know that many patients they have comorbidities such as that they had a problem with interacting with their friends and their loved ones, and that they have decreased the motivations to go to work, and then it really affects their daily functions such as sleeping, right? And so that's another comorbidity that is very often. So they often also have altered psychological issues such as depression and anxiety.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's, a couple of the other persons that we've interviewed have been looking at like circadian biology, and sleep disruption, sleep hygiene, in the context of chronic pain and cancer. And certainly there's a lot there, and also depression and the link between depression and inflammation and I mean, it's very, very important that we sort of understand how this is all working, right? I,
Yeah.
so in the context of oral cancer, are there direct links between oral neuronal somatosensory neurons and circadian rhythms or sleep disruption in the context of oral cancer?
That's a really good question. I actually haven't encountered any studies like that, but I can tell you that pain intensity does correlate to sleep quality. So we have some early data to suggest that there is a positive correlation. And another thing is that we found that spontaneous pain, which is the type of pain uh, that patient have, which doesn't require external stimulus, which is probably a good predictor for decreased sleep quality.
Hmm.
makes sense, right? This is a pain that that is still the neurons are still firing even when the patients are sleeping,
Mm-hmm.
which then decrease their sleep quality.
Just thinking about the pain associated disruption in sleep patterns and sleep hygiene, when under the best circumstances you have successful treatment of the cancer or remission, do the sleep disruptions persist? Is there some sort of memory of this sort of these complications associated with the original tumor? Oh, no
Uh,
video.
so I um, yeah, that's actually a question that I don't know, but I can tell you that we are also following up patients before treatment and also after treatment. So we have recently completed a prospective study in 118 patients.
Hmm.
And about half of them that we actually do have questionnaires related to their pain and sleep. We also know that the pain is actually an interesting part because in this study that we found the pre-treatment pain probably can predict the post-treatment pain. So in many patients that don't have pain early on, they are also less likely to have post-treatment pain. So I do feel like perhaps the sleep can be improved after treatment when the pain is being managed, but we needed to really look more deep into that question.
Hmm. You also mentioned, it's super interesting, you also mentioned depression and self-efficacy. People withdraw from sort of their social networks and they begin to self-limit in terms of what they think they can do and so forth. Um, do you think that that's a, a a modality that can be used for therapeutic intervention? I mean, does the tendency to withdraw actually exacerbate the disease, and does trying to get them to re-engage with their own functional capacity and also psychosocial social networks perhaps improve outcomes?
Yeah, so I have a collaborator who runs a large head and neck cancer clinic in Brazil. So he has been looking into sleep quality, especially related to how social support, like the support from caregivers, might actually help the patient's quality of life in terms of sleep and also mitigate depression.
As an as
So
an
so I
as
think
an
that's why.
augmentation, not necessarily as a replacement for more standard of care approaches.
Yeah, I think that's why I think in this space that we need interdisciplinary research, bringing in people from different perspective, psychiatrists and, social workers, clinicians and neurobiologists and cancer biologists, right, really to tackle the issue, with joint force.
I think that that's absolutely true, and that's part of why, in fact, we're so excited about the Cancer Neuroscience Symposium, because the participants are coming from backgrounds of anthropology, backgrounds of psychedelic research, and pain research, ECM, persons like yourself, bioengineering, immunologists, many clinicians and social care workers. So I think that that's part of the beauty of this interdisciplinary science, really. You mentioned Brazil, and it just made me think about, um, you know, I guess the culture of pain management and whether or not uh, different societies, different cultures may find different ways of managing pain and reporting pain. You also mentioned sex, and I wonder if men are more likely to admit they have pain than women. So could you speak to sort of sex and culture as potential, you know, filters through which it's hard to gauge objective pain?
Yeah, so this is one of the those hot debated
Hmm.
topics in the field, right? So culture and sex do influence the pain, and in some cultures that
Still self-reported pain, but also objective pain, or
objective pain. So this one we haven't really compared, so I cannot speak too much about that. But I think in terms of self-reported pain, we do know that men is probably less likely to expose their vulnerabilities, and women are more outspoken, about their pain, and I believe that to some contexts, especially in certain, culture, that might be true. And but then biological wise, we do know that there's a biological basis in terms of sex differences in pain, right? So the neurons, the nociceptive neurons, that they differs in terms of their expression of those receptors, and also in terms of glia, that we know that there's sex differences in glial cells and how they modulate pain.
so are you speaking to data in like non-human animal models, like in mouse models, or
Yes, the most of evidence are from the animal models.
and in those scenarios, the biological male mice are more nociceptor active, higher levels of signaling than females, or how does that work?
It's really context dependent.
Mm.
So we recently found that in terms of the the baseline, the signal is different between male and female mice, and then they also differs in terms of how they respond to, for example, tumor suppressive environment versus the immune hot tumor environment.
That's interesting. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so yeah, but of course, it's a very complicated system that we still
Mhm.
trying to find a clue that how to explain some of the sex differences that we see in our mouse tumor models, and so far I don't really have a very clear answer to
Well,
offer.
I'm really curious, this potential biological sex, trajectory of pain response, and tumor burden and tumor growth. Probably it's the case that the tumor is informing the neuron to modulate immune responses, and those immune responses may influence nociceptor signaling. They may influence TLR signaling. So I just wonder, since you're a person that studies sort of phenotypes of pain, does the progression of pain phenotypes in biological males versus biological females, if you were to look like at a list of pain phenotypes, would you be able to say, oh, male, oh, female, oh, male? Are there patterns, and sort of waves of anticipated response that you would say are characteristically associated with biological sex?
Yeah, we hope that we can find such patterns, but so far, at least in our clinical cohort, we didn't find any clear patterns. And I think one of the issue in the head and neck cancer is that the sex ratio in terms of the prevalence of cancer is really 3 to 1. So males are more likely to develop head and neck cancer. So in our cohort, we always have less women patients that have cancer. So when we compared sex differences in terms of pain intensity, we do find that there's a tendency that females are the intensity are higher, but at least is specific to this cohort, we didn't find a statistical significance in terms of sex difference. But I think that's because predominantly our patients are from male.
Yeah, I mean it's just super interesting. I wanted to come back to the type of research you're doing, which I think is very innovative, and and you know essential really as we move towards more holistic science and holistic sort of recognition that parts interact, right? This sort of subjective assessment, through patient interviews and questionnaires, and trying to complete the puzzle with objective data, on sensory signaling and tumor size and immune phenotyping. It's got to be difficult because on the one hand you're doing these subjective questionnaires, which they feel very incomplete. That there's a lot underneath those questions that could perhaps explain the answer, which is oftentimes a number, a scale, like a Likert scale of 1 to 5 or something like that. So where do you feel like there's both opportunity but also limitations in trying to grapple with these two modalities of data science? On the one hand, collecting subjective measures from people for whom, depending on the time of day, whether they feel pain at that moment, whether they're reporting pain in the last week or the last year, or whether they're dealing with existential stressors, like stigma or depression. How do you, as a scientist, how do you think about the benefits and the burdens of collecting that kind of data and integrating it into a more holistic understanding with some of the more electrophysiological data that you're collecting? It's got to be tough.
Yeah, it is tough. I mean, even like you can sort of do some more objective studies, but we are all, we only capture, that moment, right? So, but then the pain is probably an evolving process like a cancer, right? So it is a really complex issue. But I think that maybe, some new technologies like, the wearable devices, down the road might help us to address those issues that patient can maybe record their pain on a daily basis in a easier way, or maybe there's other biomarkers that we can capture using those wearable devices in terms of the conduction velocity of the nerve, you know uh, at a given time, and then also following disease progression. Yeah.
I think it's just the more we talk about it, the more kind of excited I get for your research. Because I think about on the one hand the progression of self-reported pain, on the other hand maybe like one axis, and the other axis the objective measures of pain progression, and how you could imagine that in most scenarios the subjective report of pain is going to be correlated to objective measures of pain.
Yeah.
But there may also be discordance,
Yes.
where a person, by all accounts, the objective measures should mean lots of pain. Maybe I think in osteoarthritis there's scenarios like this, but they don't report a
Mhm.
lot of pain, and vice versa, where there's a lot of pain but really very little evidence. Maybe the tumor masses there are very small or close to non-existent, but present. I just wonder about what this says, about these types of analyses and whether there are opportunities there for looking at sort of the discordant, the high pain, low objective, and the high objective, low subjective reports of pain. What do you make of that phenomenon? Do you even see it?
So we certainly see some discordance, and but this is actually a very interesting topic that we actually never thought too deep about it, because we do see we are more focused on the coherent data points, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
so Um, but I think that maybe because that we haven't designed our questionnaires or the objective testing, like I think that really to define what is the outcome measurement is probably very important. Maybe it's our questionnaire design, that is problematic, right? We are not asking, for example, the exact biological phenomena that will bring out certain type of pain phenotype, right?
Mhm.
So I think that we probably need to really dive deep into, how we segment, the pain and tease apart the heterogeneity, because pain is such a complicated problem that, the duration matters, right, and the trigger matters, and the quality matters, intensity matters, and that changes, from time to time. And also, when the disease involved, the pain also changes, right? And then there's also like other biological factors that can contribute in, to the pain, at the moment of the measurement, right? When the patient is under, some other kind of stress, and whether they are sleep deprived, or do they, eat well, they are hydrated. I think those factors were all contributing to the measurement. So it is indeed a very, complicated question, and we just need to maybe have a better design and segmentation of the
Mhm. So it's got to be super exciting for you to be in New York, setting up this this sort of research program, being and recognizing sort of the need for interdisciplinary studies. Just tell us about just how that's going for you. Do you feel like it's a real challenge to get, excuse me, across silos of psychiatry? Study. I would imagine in some cases you might be thinking about sensors and trackers and sort of these sort of cohort studies where you follow populations in their daily lives to gather information on how they live their lives, along with bringing that into the lab and understanding some more pathway analysis. So just tell us how it feels. Does it feel daunting? Does it feel exciting? Does it feel reaching across the aisle? Is this something, do you feel like there's an openness to that, or are there barriers?
I actually, I'm very fortunate to have collaborators that are clinicians, and also cancer biologists, which really helped me because, going to this field, one of the challenges is, of course, I'm a neurobiologist, that I have very limited understanding in terms of immunology or cancer biology, and so the patient cohorts that I do collaborate with a couple of universities, across the country, and also in Brazil. So those are my long-term collaborators. So they really helped, giving the questionnaires to those patients and send along us all these corresponding patient clinical histopathological data that we can do, data mining. And then my part, actually, in general, is that once we have the pain questionnaire collected, and we have a specific clinical question that we wanted to address, we will also do, for example, molecular studies in collected patient tumor tissues, and we will then generate mouse models, right? So if there's a particular gene, a common gene that we can identify in the human and also in the mouse models, then we potentially can knock down this gene or manipulate in the animal models. So that which will then provide mechanistic more depth in much more depth, right? So this is really the general approach that we will, that I think is translational. That we will using the pain questionnaires and then biological samples collected on patients, and then we develop the animal models and try to find a common mechanism that we can tackle in preclinical studies.
Mm-hmm. I think you mentioned data mining, and it reminds me that you have done some work in AI and machine learning. And when you think about data mining, you think about the collection of multimodal data of all types, and then trying to find patterns. Do you feel like there's a lot of future opportunity in that space, or do you feel like it can be very misleading because it relies so heavily on the data in, therefore the outcomes out can be very limiting? What are your thoughts on this?
I do believe that there's a lot of opportunities in that, especially with the advancement of AI and machine learning techniques. That we might, and once we have a large enough, data set, right? So that might, help us to discover some of the patterns or mechanism that we were not able to do in very limited animal studies.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think this desire for discovery is probably a good place to finish up. I want to thank you for the wonderful work you're doing. It's it's extraordinary to bridge subjective and objective, and we look forward to hearing more about your work at the conference.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for tuning in today. We hope you'll join us as we continue the conversation in Houston and virtually at the 2026 Cancer Neuroscience Symposium hosted by MD Anderson and Wiley's Advanced Portfolio.